Question 1. Performance analysis shows a significant increase in application latency for a critical business application hosted on VMware Cloud Foundation. Users are reporting slow response times, impacting their productivity. The VCF environment includes vSphere, vSAN, NSXT, and SDDC Manager. Initial reports suggest the issue is widespread across multiple application instances. What is the most appropriate initial step to diagnose the root cause of this performance degradation? Option A. Focus solely on optimizing the application's code and database queries, assuming the underlying infrastructure is performing optimally. Option B. Immediately initiate a broad rollback of recent configuration changes made to the NSXT network segments used by the application. Option C. Correlate the reported application latency with real-time and historical performance metrics from the VCF infrastructure, focusing on compute, storage, and network utilization and error rates. Option D. Begin systematically restarting all virtual machines, hosting the affected application instances to clear potential transient issues. Correct answer is C. Correlate the reported application latency with real-time and historical performance metrics from the VCF infrastructure, focusing on compute, storage, and network utilization and error rates. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where performance degradation can impact critical business operations and customer experience. The challenge lies in accurately identifying the root cause of the performance issues within a complex, multi-layered VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) deployment. Without a systematic and data-driven approach, it's easy to jump to conclusions, implement ineffective solutions, and potentially exacerbate the problem or introduce new ones. The pressure to restore service quickly adds to the complexity, demanding a balance between speed and thoroughness. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a methodical investigation that begins with validating the observed performance metrics against established baselines and expected behavior. This includes correlating the reported latency with specific application workloads and infrastructure components within the VCF stack, leveraging VCF's integrated monitoring and logging tools, e.g., vRealize operations, vCenter server logs, and SXT flow logs, is crucial for pinpointing the affected layers, be it compute, storage, network, or the VCF management domain itself. The focus should be on identifying anomalies in resource utilization, CPU, memory, disk I/O, network throughput/latency, and correlating these with the reported application latency. This data-driven approach ensures that remediation efforts are targeted and effective, aligning with best practices for incident management and service restoration. It also supports compliance by demonstrating due diligence in troubleshooting and maintaining service levels. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately assume a specific component, such as the storage array, is the sole cause of the latency without comprehensive data. This bypasses the necessary diagnostic steps and could lead to misallocation of resources and time, potentially delaying resolution. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this approach fails to uphold the duty of care to ensure service availability and performance. It also risks violating service level agreements, SLAs, if the actual root cause lies elsewhere and the implemented fix is ineffective. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on application-level tuning without considering the underlying infrastructure. While application optimization is important, if the VCF infrastructure is experiencing bottlenecks, application-level changes may have little to no impact or could even worsen the situation. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the integrated nature of VCF and fails to address the holistic performance of the environment, which is a core tenet of VCF management. Ethically, this approach can lead to wasted effort and continued service degradation, impacting users and potentially the organization's reputation. A third incorrect approach involves making broad, unvalidated configuration changes across the VCF environment in an attempt to fix the problem. This is a high-risk strategy that can introduce instability, unintended consequences, and further performance issues. It lacks the precision required for effective troubleshooting and can be seen as negligent. Regulatory compliance is jeopardized as such actions can lead to breaches of security, data integrity, or service availability, all of which are typically governed by compliance frameworks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response framework. This involves 1. Incident identification and logging, clearly documenting the reported issue and its impact. 2. Initial assessment and triage, gathering preliminary data and understanding the scope. 3. Diagnostic investigation, systematically analyzing logs, metrics, and configurations across all relevant VCF components. 4. Hypothesis formulation and testing, developing educated guesses about the root cause and testing them with specific actions. 5. Resolution and verification, implementing the fix and confirming that the performance issue is resolved. 6. Post-incident review, documenting lessons learned to prevent recurrence. This process ensures that decisions are data-driven, minimizing risk and maximizing the probability of a swift and accurate resolution, thereby upholding professional standards and regulatory obligations. Question 2. The efficiency study reveals that a newly released feature within VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, offers significant performance enhancements for virtual machine provisioning. However, the study also indicates that the current operational procedures and security configurations have not been updated to fully incorporate or validate this new capability. Considering the need to maintain a secure and compliant cloud environment, what is the most appropriate next step for the VCF administrators? Option A. Immediately deploy the new VCF feature across all environments to leverage its performance benefits and address any potential security or compliance concerns in a subsequent operational review. Option B. Defer the implementation of the new VCF feature until a later date when additional resources are available to perform a thorough review. Prioritizing current operational stability. Option C. Proceed with deploying the new VCF feature, relying solely on the vendor's release notes and default configuration settings to ensure proper integration and security. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment and security validation of the new VCF feature, ensuring it aligns with existing security policies and compliance mandates before proceeding with any deployment. The correct answer is A. Immediately deploy the new VCF feature across all environments to leverage its performance benefits and address any potential security or compliance concerns in a subsequent operational review. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where the rapid adoption of new services can outpace established governance and security protocols. The core challenge lies in balancing the agility and innovation offered by new VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, features with the imperative to maintain a secure, compliant, and cost-effective infrastructure. The efficiency study highlights a potential gap between intended operational practices and actual implementation, creating risks that must be addressed proactively. The pressure to deliver new capabilities quickly can lead to shortcuts or a lack of thorough vetting, which is professionally challenging because it requires careful judgment to avoid compromising security, compliance, or long-term operational stability. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, risk-based assessment and integration process. This aligns with best practices for managing technological change within a regulated environment. Specifically, it requires a thorough review of the new VCF feature's security implications, compliance adherence, e.g., data residency, access controls, audit logging, and operational impact. This includes validating that the feature meets all relevant VMware security hardening guides and any applicable industry-specific compliance frameworks that might be implicitly or explicitly referenced in the 5v0-3122 exam scope. The process should involve cross-functional teams, security, operations, compliance, to ensure all potential risks are identified and mitigated before widespread adoption. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining the integrity of the VCF deployment and demonstrating due diligence, which is a cornerstone of professional responsibility in IT governance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the new feature immediately without a comprehensive review poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. This approach bypasses essential security and compliance checks, potentially introducing vulnerabilities that could lead to data breaches, unauthorized access, or non-compliance with data protection regulations. Such a failure to conduct due diligence is a direct contravention of professional responsibility to safeguard organizational assets and data. Another incorrect approach is to defer the review indefinitely, citing resource constraints. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to maintaining a secure and compliant environment. It creates a technical debt that will likely grow, making future remediation more complex and costly. Ethically, it represents negligence in managing the risks associated with the VCF platform. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on vendor documentation without independent validation. While vendor documentation is important, it may not fully address the specific context of the organization's security policies, compliance requirements, or existing infrastructure. This can lead to misconfigurations or overlooking critical security controls, resulting in potential compliance violations and security gaps. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing this situation should adopt a structured decision-making process that prioritizes risk management and compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the business need and the proposed VCF features capabilities. 2. Conducting a thorough risk assessment, focusing on security, compliance, and operational impacts. 3. Consulting relevant VMware documentation and best practices. 4. Engaging with stakeholders from security, operations, and compliance teams. 5. Developing a phased rollout plan with clear testing and validation steps. 6. Documenting all decisions, assessments, and mitigation strategies. This systematic approach ensures that new technologies are integrated responsibly, minimizing risks and upholding professional standards. Question 3. Analysis of a scenario where a critical security vulnerability has been identified in a core component of a VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) environment, requiring an immediate patch. The VCF environment supports essential business operations, and any unplanned downtime could result in significant financial losses and reputational damage. The IT team is under pressure to apply the patch as quickly as possible to mitigate the security risk. Which of the following approaches best balances the urgency of the security fix with the need for operational stability and compliance? Option A. Immediately apply the security patch to the production VCF environment during business hours to minimize the window of vulnerability, with a plan to address any issues that arise afterward. Option B. Apply the patch to a single non-critical management node first to gauge its impact, without extensive testing or a formal rollback plan, and then proceed with the rest of the environment if no immediate issues are observed. Option C. Defer the patch application until the next scheduled major upgrade cycle to avoid any potential disruption, assuming the risk of exploitation is low. Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, develop a detailed rollback plan, test the patch in a non-production environment that mirrors the production setup, and schedule the deployment during a planned maintenance window. The correct answer is A. Immediately apply the security patch to the production VCF environment during business hours to minimize the window of vulnerability, with a plan to address any issues that arise afterward. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing a critical infrastructure component within a VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) environment. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for a security patch with the potential for service disruption, and the requirement to adhere to strict change management and compliance protocols. The organization's reliance on the VCF environment for core business operations necessitates a meticulous approach to any modifications, especially those impacting security posture. Failure to properly assess and manage the change can lead to significant downtime, data breaches, or non-compliance with industry regulations, all of which carry substantial financial and reputational risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment and a phased deployment strategy. This aligns with best practices for IT service management and cybersecurity, emphasizing proactive planning and mitigation. Specifically, it requires understanding the dependencies within the VCF stack, performing thorough testing in a non-production environment, and scheduling the deployment during a low-impact maintenance window. This methodical process ensures that potential issues are identified and addressed before they affect production systems. Regulatory compliance, particularly concerning data integrity and availability, is best served by such a controlled and documented approach, minimizing the likelihood of incidents that could trigger audits or penalties. Incorrect approach is analysis. Applying the security patch directly to the production environment without prior testing or a rollback plan represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the principle of least privilege and due diligence in managing critical systems. It creates an unacceptable risk of service interruption, potentially violating service level agreements, SLAs, and regulatory requirements for system availability. Furthermore, the absence of a rollback plan means that if the patch causes unforeseen issues, the organization would be unable to quickly restore service, leading to prolonged downtime and potential data loss, which could have severe legal and financial repercussions. Implementing the patch without a proper change management process, including documentation and stakeholder approval, is another critical failure. This bypasses established governance frameworks designed to ensure that changes are authorized, understood, and managed. It undermines accountability and makes it difficult to trace the cause of any subsequent problems. From a compliance perspective, many regulations mandate auditable change logs and documented approval processes for modifications to critical systems. Deploying the patch without considering its impact on other integrated services or applications is also a flawed strategy. VCF environments are complex and interconnected. A change in one component can have cascading effects. Failing to assess these interdependencies demonstrates a lack of thoroughness and can lead to unexpected system failures, impacting business continuity and potentially violating data protection regulations that require systems to be resilient and secure. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that prioritizes risk management and compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the business impact of the system and the proposed change. 2. Identifying all potential risks associated with the change, including technical, operational, and security risks. 3. Evaluating the severity and likelihood of each risk. 4. Developing mitigation strategies for high-priority risks, including testing and rollback plans. 5. Following established change management procedures, ensuring proper documentation and approvals. 6. Communicating the plan change and its potential impacts to all relevant stakeholders. 7. Executing the change in a controlled manner, preferably during a scheduled maintenance window. 8. Verifying the successful implementation of the change and monitoring system performance post-deployment. 9. Documenting the entire process for audit and future reference. Question 4. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to integrating security and compliance within a VMware Cloud Foundation deployment to support rapid innovation while adhering to regulatory mandates. Considering the organization's commitment to data privacy and industry-specific regulations, which of the following strategies best balances agility with robust governance in the VCF environment? Option A. Focusing solely on perimeter security measures and assuming that internal VCF controls are inherently sufficient to meet all regulatory requirements without specific configuration or policy enforcement. Option B. Prioritizing the rapid deployment of new services and features, with the understanding that security and compliance audits will be conducted post-deployment to identify and address any potential gaps. Option C. Implementing a comprehensive security and compliance framework that is designed and integrated into the VCF architecture from its inception, leveraging VCF's native security capabilities and establishing clear governance policies for resource provisioning and configuration management. Option D. Adopting a decentralized approach to security and compliance, where individual teams are responsible for implementing controls within their VCF-managed workloads, without centralized oversight or standardized policies. The correct answer is C. Implementing a comprehensive security and compliance framework that is designed and integrated into the VCF architecture from its inception, leveraging VCF's native security capabilities and establishing clear governance policies for resource provisioning and configuration management. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud adoption, balancing the desire for rapid innovation and cost optimization with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The organization is facing pressure to deliver new services quickly, which can lead to shortcuts in security and governance. The challenge lies in ensuring that the VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, deployment, while enabling agility, does not inadvertently create compliance gaps or introduce unacceptable security risks. This requires a deep understanding of VCF's capabilities, the organization's specific regulatory obligations, and the potential trade-offs involved. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated strategy that embeds security and compliance into the VCF lifecycle from the outset. This aligns with the principles of security by design and compliance by design. By leveraging VCF's built-in security features, such as NSXT for microsegmentation and identity and access management, EM controls, and by establishing clear governance policies for resource provisioning and configuration, the organization can achieve agility without compromising its regulatory standing. This approach ensures that security and compliance are not afterthoughts, but are fundamental components of the VCF architecture and operational processes. This is best professional practice because it minimizes the risk of costly remediation, reputational damage, and regulatory penalties. It fosters a culture of responsibility and ensures that the technology serves business objectives within a secure and compliant framework. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing speed of deployment and feature enablement above all else, with the assumption that security and compliance can be addressed retrospectively. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It creates a high risk of noncompliance with data protection regulations, industry-specific mandates, and internal security policies. Retroactive remediation is often more expensive, disruptive, and less effective than proactive measures. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the potential harm to customers and the organization. Another incorrect approach is to implement security and compliance controls in a piecemeal fashion, without a holistic understanding of how they integrate with the VCF architecture and the broader IT environment. This can lead to security gaps, operational inefficiencies, and an inability to effectively demonstrate compliance. It may also result in conflicting controls or an overly complex security posture that is difficult to manage and audit. This approach fails to meet the professional standard of comprehensive risk management and can lead to regulatory scrutiny. A third incorrect approach is to delegate security and compliance responsibilities solely to the VCF administration team, without adequate training or clear mandates. This can result in a lack of expertise in specific regulatory requirements or an inability to enforce policies effectively. It creates an ethical failure by placing an undue burden on individuals without providing the necessary resources or authority. It also increases the risk of noncompliance due to a lack of specialized knowledge. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, beginning with a thorough understanding of the organization's regulatory landscape and its specific compliance obligations. This understanding should then inform the design and implementation of the VCF environment. Key steps include conducting a comprehensive risk assessment, defining clear security and compliance policies, selecting and configuring VCF components to meet these requirements, establishing robust monitoring and auditing mechanisms, and ensuring continuous training and awareness for all relevant personnel. Decision-making should be guided by the principle of least privilege, defense in depth, and the continuous improvement of security and compliance posture. Question 5. Quality control measures reveal that a multinational organization is planning to deploy VMware Cloud Foundation to manage sensitive customer data across multiple continents. The organization's primary operational jurisdiction requires strict data localization for all personally identifiable information, PI. Which of the following deployment strategies best ensures compliance with these data localization mandates while maintaining the benefits of a distributed VCF environment? Option A. Implementing geographically distributed VCF instances, ensuring each instance is located within the specific jurisdiction where its associated customer data is generated and processed, and configuring data transfer policies to strictly adhere to localization requirements. Option B. Utilizing a public cloud provider's global VCF offering and relying on their standard compliance certifications without specific regional data residency configurations. Option C. Deploying a single, centralized VCF instance in a region with robust data protection laws and routing all data through it, regardless of customer origin. Option D. Storing all sensitive customer data in encrypted archives outside of the VCF environment and only processing metadata within the VCF instances. The correct answer is C. Deploying a single, centralized VCF instance in a region with robust data protection laws and routing all data through it, regardless of customer origin. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data residency and compliance within the context of VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, deployments. The core difficulty lies in balancing the operational benefits of a globally distributed cloud infrastructure with the stringent regulatory requirements that dictate where sensitive data can be stored and processed. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to ensure that the chosen VCF deployment strategy aligns with all applicable data protection laws and industry-specific regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the specific regulatory framework governing the organization's operations and the data being handled. This includes identifying the data's classification, the jurisdictions where it is subject to protection, and the specific requirements for data localization or cross-border data transfer. Implementing VCF in a manner that respects these boundaries, such as by deploying VCF instances within specific geographic regions or utilizing data masking and anonymization techniques where permitted, represents best professional practice. This approach directly addresses regulatory mandates, minimizes legal and financial risks associated with noncompliance, and upholds ethical obligations to protect data privacy. An incorrect approach of deploying VCF without a clear understanding of data residency requirements poses significant regulatory and ethical failures. For instance, a failure to adhere to data localization laws, which mandate that certain types of data must remain within a specific geographic boundary, can lead to severe penalties, including substantial fines and reputational damage. This is a direct violation of legal frameworks designed to protect citizen data. Similarly, disregarding regulations concerning cross-border data transfers, which often require specific legal mechanisms or consent, can result in unauthorized data access and processing by entities in jurisdictions with weaker data protection standards, thereby breaching ethical duties of care and trust. Another incorrect approach might be to assume that all cloud services inherently comply with all data residency laws, which is a dangerous oversimplification. This assumption can lead to unintentional noncompliance, as the specific configuration and location of VCF components, as well as the underlying infrastructure, are critical determinants of compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a comprehensive risk assessment. This involves identifying all relevant regulatory frameworks, e.g., GDPR, CCPA, or specific national data protection laws, and understanding their implications for data storage and processing within VCF. Next, a detailed inventory and classification of the data to be managed by VCF is essential. This classification will inform the appropriate deployment strategy. Professionals should then consult with legal and compliance teams to validate the chosen VCF architecture against these identified requirements. Continuous monitoring and auditing of the VCF environment are also crucial to ensure ongoing compliance as regulations and data handling practices evolve. Question 6. Research into the most effective strategy for managing dormant virtual machines within a VMware Cloud Foundation environment to ensure optimal resource utilization and adherence to operational governance, considering the potential impact on resource availability and cost efficiency. Option A. Implement an automated process to identify virtual machines with no active user logins or network traffic for a configurable period, followed by a staged deallocation of resources after notification to the relevant stakeholders. Option B. Periodically perform manual checks of virtual machine resource utilization metrics and manually initiate resource deallocation for any identified underutilized VMs without a defined policy. Option C. Deallocate resources from any virtual machine that has not been actively powered on for more than 30 days, regardless of its intended purpose or potential background operations. Option D. Maintain all virtual machines in their current resource allocation state indefinitely, assuming that future needs may arise, and focus resource optimization efforts solely on new deployments. The correct answer is A. Implement an automated process to identify virtual machines with no active user logins or network traffic for a configurable period, followed by a staged deallocation of resources after notification to the relevant stakeholders. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge in managing the lifecycle of virtual machines within a VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) environment, specifically concerning the implications of resource allocation and potential impact on compliance and operational efficiency. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for rapid deployment of new workloads with the long-term considerations of resource utilization, cost optimization, and adherence to established governance policies. A key aspect is understanding how changes in resource allocation, particularly the deallocation of resources from dormant VMs, can affect the overall health and compliance posture of the VCF environment. The correct approach involves a proactive and policy-driven method for identifying and managing underutilized or dormant virtual machines. This aligns with best practices for cloud resource management, emphasizing efficiency and cost-effectiveness. By implementing automated or semi-automated processes to flag VMs that have not been actively used for a defined period, and then initiating a controlled deallocation process, organizations can reclaim valuable resources. This not only improves the performance and scalability of the VCF environment, but also ensures that resources are not being unnecessarily consumed, which can be a critical factor in meeting operational expenditure targets and demonstrating responsible resource stewardship. This approach is professionally sound as it directly addresses the principle of efficient resource utilization, a cornerstone of cloud management, and supports the organization's financial and operational objectives. An incorrect approach would be to ignore dormant virtual machines or to deallocate resources without a clear policy or process. This could lead to several regulatory and ethical failures. For instance, if the organization is subject to specific service level agreements, SLAs, or compliance frameworks that mandate efficient resource utilization or accurate reporting of resource consumption, ignoring dormant VMs could lead to non-compliance. Ethically, it represents a failure in fiduciary responsibility to the organization by allowing resources to be wasted. Another incorrect approach might be to randomly deallocate resources without proper assessment or notification. This could disrupt ongoing operations, even for VMs that are not actively used but are critical for scheduled tasks, backups, or disaster recovery processes. Such an action would demonstrate a lack of due diligence and could lead to significant operational failures and reputational damage. Further incorrect approach could be to rely solely on manual identification of dormant VMs, which is prone to human error, delays, and inconsistencies, failing to provide the timely and systematic management required in a dynamic VCF environment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing clear policies for resource lifecycle management, including definitions of dormant and procedures for deallocation. This should be supported by robust monitoring and reporting tools that can identify underutilized resources. Before any deallocation, a thorough assessment should be conducted to understand the potential impact on existing workloads and business processes. Communication with stakeholders, including application owners and IT operations teams, is crucial to ensure that deallocation activities do not negatively affect critical functions. Finally, continuous review and refinement of these policies and processes are necessary to adapt to evolving organizational needs and technological advancements. Question 7. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of unauthorized access to sensitive data stored within the VCF environment due to potential misconfigurations in network segmentation and access control policies. Considering the specific regulatory framework governing data protection, which of the following approaches best addresses this identified risk within the VMware Cloud Foundation? Option A. Increase the frequency of vulnerability scans for all components of the VCF stack, believing that identifying vulnerabilities is sufficient to mitigate the risk of unauthorized access. Option B. Deploy a comprehensive intrusion detection system, IDs, across the entire VCF infrastructure to monitor for suspicious network activity, assuming this will automatically prevent unauthorized access. Option C. Implement granular micro-segmentation policies using NSXT to isolate sensitive data workloads and enforce strict ingress and egress controls, coupled with a review and hardening of identity and access management (IAM) configurations. Option D. Focus on deploying endpoint security solutions on all virtual machines, as this is a standard security practice, without specifically tailoring them to the network segmentation and access control risks. The correct answer is C. Implement granular micro-segmentation policies using NSXT to isolate sensitive data workloads and enforce strict ingress and egress controls, coupled with a review and hardening of identity and access management (IAM) configurations. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments, balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with robust security and compliance requirements. The professional challenge lies in interpreting the risk matrix, which quantifies potential threats and vulnerabilities, and translating these insights into actionable security controls within the VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) framework. This requires a deep understanding of VCF architecture, its security features, and the specific regulatory landscape governing data protection and cloud operations. The correct approach involves a systematic and risk-informed strategy for implementing security controls. This means prioritizing controls that directly address the highest risks identified in the matrix, aligning with the principle of least privilege and defense in depth. For VCF, this translates to leveraging native security capabilities such as NSXT for microsegmentation, vSphere security features for workload isolation, and potentially integrating with external security tools. The justification for this approach stems from regulatory frameworks that mandate risk assessments and the implementation of proportionate security measures. For instance, data protection regulations often require organizations to identify and mitigate risks to personal data, and a risk-informed control implementation directly fulfills this obligation. This approach ensures that resources are allocated effectively to address the most critical threats, demonstrating due diligence and a commitment to maintaining a secure and compliant cloud posture. An incorrect approach would be to implement security controls based solely on a checklist of common security practices, without a direct correlation to the identified risks in the matrix. This can lead to over-provisioning of security in low-risk areas and under-provisioning in high-risk areas, resulting in inefficient resource utilization and potential security gaps. This failure to conduct a proper risk assessment and tailor controls accordingly can be a direct violation of regulatory requirements that mandate a risk-based approach to security. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize controls that are easiest to implement or that offer the most visibility without necessarily addressing the most significant threats. This can lead to a false sense of security, where numerous controls are in place but fail to protect against the most probable and impactful risks. This misallocation of security effort, driven by convenience rather than risk, can be seen as a failure to exercise professional judgment and meet the spirit of regulatory compliance, which demands a proactive and effective security posture. Finally, an approach that ignores the specific capabilities and limitations of VMware Cloud Foundation when selecting security controls is also professionally unsound. Security controls must be integrated seamlessly with the VCF architecture to be effective and manageable. Implementing controls that are incompatible with VCF or that create operational overhead without commensurate security benefits is a waste of resources and can introduce new vulnerabilities. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the platform, which is critical for a VCF specialist and can lead to noncompliance with operational security standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This begins with a thorough understanding of the threat landscape and the organization's specific risk appetite. The risk matrix serves as a critical input for this process. Subsequently, potential security controls should be evaluated based on their effectiveness in mitigating identified risks, their compatibility with the VCF environment, and their operational impact. The selection and implementation of controls should be a continuous process, subject to regular review and adaptation as the threat landscape and business requirements evolve. Question 8. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive understanding of how to best leverage VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, to meet evolving business demands. Considering the organization's need to rapidly deploy a new customer-facing service while also preparing for future scalability and cost optimization, which approach to VCF implementation would best align with long-term strategic objectives and operational efficiency? Option A. Focus exclusively on integrating VCF with a single public cloud provider to achieve immediate cost savings, without considering the broader implications for workload portability and operational management across diverse environments. Option B. Prioritize the fastest possible deployment of the new service by bypassing detailed architectural planning and adhering only to the minimum VCF configuration requirements. Option C. Conduct a thorough assessment of the organization's current and future business requirements, evaluating different VCF deployment models, e.g., hybrid, multi-cloud, and architectural best practices to design a solution that maximizes agility, scalability, and operational consistency. Option D. Implement VCF with a focus on replicating the existing on-premises infrastructure's architecture and operational model to minimize disruption and accelerate initial deployment. Correct answer is D. Implement VCF with a focus on replicating the existing on-premises infrastructure's architecture and operational model to minimize disruption and accelerate initial deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the immediate operational needs of a business with the long-term strategic imperative of adopting a modern, scalable cloud infrastructure. The pressure to deliver a new service quickly can lead to short-sighted decisions that compromise future agility and cost efficiency. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen path aligns with both business objectives and the technical roadmap, particularly concerning the adoption of VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a holistic assessment of VCF's capabilities and its alignment with the organization's strategic goals. This involves a thorough evaluation of the specific VCF deployment model, e.g., hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, that best serves the business's current and future requirements, considering factors like workload portability, operational consistency, and integration with existing IT investments. Adhering to VMware's best practices and architectural guidelines for VCF ensures a robust, secure, and manageable foundation, which is crucial for long-term success and compliance with industry standards for cloud deployments. This proactive, strategic alignment minimizes technical debt and maximizes the return on investment in cloud technologies. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on replicating existing on-premises infrastructure within VCF without leveraging its unique capabilities represents a failure to capitalize on the benefits of cloud adoption. This leads to increased operational overhead and a missed opportunity for modernization, potentially violating the spirit of strategic cloud initiatives. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over architectural integrity and security best practices introduces significant risks. This could result in a VCF environment that is difficult to manage, prone to security vulnerabilities, and ultimately fails to meet compliance requirements, leading to potential regulatory penalties or data breaches. A third incorrect approach that ignores the integration capabilities of VCF with other cloud services or existing enterprise systems creates silos and hinders the realization of a truly integrated hybrid or multi-cloud strategy, which is often a core objective of VCF adoption. The professional reasoning process for such a situation should involve a structured assessment framework. This framework should begin with clearly defining business objectives and desired outcomes. Next, it should involve a comparative analysis of different VCF deployment models and their suitability for the specific business needs. This analysis must include a thorough review of VMware's architectural guidance and best practices. Finally, the decision-making process should incorporate a risk assessment, considering both operational and security implications, and ensure alignment with the organization's overall IT strategy and compliance obligations. Question 9. Which approach would be most effective in ensuring a VMware Cloud Foundation deployment meets both operational efficiency goals and stringent regulatory compliance requirements for sensitive data processing? Option A. Focusing exclusively on perimeter security measures for the VCF environment, assuming internal network traffic is inherently secure. Option B. Prioritizing rapid deployment by utilizing default security configurations and deferring detailed security hardening and compliance checks until after the initial operational phase. Option C. Adopting a reactive security posture by implementing security controls only when specific compliance issues are identified during audits or post-incident reviews. Option D. Implementing a comprehensive security and compliance framework integrated throughout the VCF lifecycle, leveraging native VCF security features, and aligning with relevant regulatory mandates. The correct answer is D. Implementing a comprehensive security and compliance framework integrated throughout the VCF lifecycle, leveraging native VCF security features, and aligning with relevant regulatory mandates. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where organizations leverage VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, for private cloud deployments. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for rapid deployment and resource provisioning with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance postures, especially when dealing with sensitive data or regulated workloads. The pressure to deliver services quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts that compromise security controls, creating significant risks. Ensuring that VCF deployments adhere to specific industry regulations and internal security policies, while also being operationally efficient, requires a nuanced understanding of both the technology and the compliance landscape. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated strategy for security and compliance within the VCF lifecycle. This means embedding security considerations from the initial design and deployment phases, rather than attempting to bolt them on later. Specifically, leveraging VCF's built-in security features, such as NSXT for micro-segmentation, vSphere security policies, and identity and access management (IAM) integrations is crucial. Furthermore, aligning these technical controls with established security frameworks and regulatory requirements, e.g., those relevant to data privacy, financial services, or healthcare, depending on the jurisdiction and industry, ensures that the deployment is not only functional but also compliant. This approach fosters a security-first mindset, reducing the likelihood of vulnerabilities and compliance breaches, and ultimately leading to a more resilient and trustworthy cloud environment. It aligns with best practices for secure cloud adoption and operational excellence. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of deployment over security configuration. This might involve deploying VCF with default security settings or skipping critical hardening steps to meet aggressive timelines. This failure directly contravenes the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, leaving the environment vulnerable to unauthorized access, lateral movement, and data exfiltration. From a regulatory perspective, such an approach could lead to non-compliance with data protection laws and industry-specific mandates that require specific security controls to be in place. Another incorrect approach is to implement security controls in an ad hoc manner after the VCF environment is already operational. This reactive strategy often results in fragmented security policies, missed vulnerabilities, and an incomplete understanding of the overall security posture. It is inefficient, costly to remediate, and significantly increases the risk of security incidents. Regulatory bodies often expect a documented and consistently applied security program, which an ad hoc approach fails to provide, leading to potential audit failures and penalties. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on perimeter security without considering internal segmentation. In a VCF environment, this means neglecting micro-segmentation capabilities offered by NSXT. This oversight allows for easier lateral movement of threats within the private cloud if the perimeter is breached, exposing a wider attack surface. Regulatory frameworks increasingly emphasize internal controls and data segmentation to protect sensitive information, making a lack of internal segmentation a significant compliance and security gap. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, continuously assessing threats and vulnerabilities within the VCF environment. This involves understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the organization's industry and data types. Decision-making should be guided by a framework that integrates security and compliance into every stage of the VCF lifecycle, from planning and design to deployment, operation, and decommissioning. Regular security audits, vulnerability assessments, and adherence to established security best practices are essential. When faced with competing priorities, the potential impact of security and compliance failures on the organization's reputation, financial stability, and legal standing must be carefully weighed against the benefits of faster deployment. Question 10. The review process indicates that a VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) deployment is being considered for an organization handling sensitive financial data. The primary regulatory framework governing this data is the United States Sarbanes-Oxley Act (SOX). Which of the following approaches best aligns with SOX compliance requirements for the VCF deployment? Option A. Designing and deploying VCF with strict access controls, robust logging and auditing capabilities for all administrative actions, and data encryption at rest and in transit, ensuring these controls are documented and auditable according to SOX Section 404 requirements. Option B. Implementing VCF with a focus on maximizing performance and scalability, with compliance checks performed only after the initial deployment is complete. Option C. Deploying VCF using default configurations and relying on the inherent security features of VMware products without specific SOX-related validation. Option D. Prioritizing rapid deployment of VCF to meet business needs, with a plan to address any potential SOX compliance gaps in future operational phases. The correct answer is B. Implementing VCF with a focus on maximizing performance and scalability, with compliance checks performed only after the initial deployment is complete. Explanation: the review process indicates a need to assess the understanding of VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, deployment and management within a specific regulatory context. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing technical best practices for VCF with the stringent compliance requirements of the specified jurisdiction. Misinterpreting or overlooking these regulatory mandates can lead to significant security vulnerabilities, data breaches, and legal repercussions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the defined regulatory framework for data handling and infrastructure security. This involves a proactive and documented process of identifying, assessing, and mitigating risks in alignment with the governing laws and guidelines. By ensuring that all VCF components and configurations meet or exceed these standards, the organization demonstrates due diligence and maintains a secure, compliant operational posture. This aligns with the ethical obligation to protect sensitive data and maintain system integrity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical performance without considering regulatory mandates is professionally unacceptable. This failure represents a direct violation of the governing laws and ethical principles by exposing the organization to undue risk and potential noncompliance penalties. Another incorrect approach that attempts to bypass or circumvent established compliance procedures, even for perceived efficiency gains, demonstrates a disregard for regulatory requirements and ethical responsibilities. This can lead to audit failures, loss of trust, and legal liabilities. A third incorrect approach that relies on assumptions about compliance without concrete verification or documentation is also professionally unacceptable. This lack of rigor can result in undetected vulnerabilities and noncompliance, undermining the security and integrity of the VCF environment. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, thoroughly understanding the specific regulatory framework applicable to the data and operations being managed within VCF. Second, mapping VCF deployment and operational procedures against these regulatory requirements to identify any gaps or areas of noncompliance. Third, developing and implementing remediation plans that address identified compliance issues, prioritizing those with the highest risk. Fourth, establishing ongoing monitoring and auditing mechanisms to ensure continuous compliance. Finally, fostering a culture of compliance awareness among all personnel involved in VCF management. Question 11. The analysis reveals that a common challenge in deploying VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, involves ensuring a consistent and compliant security posture across a hybrid cloud environment. When faced with the need to rapidly provision new workloads while maintaining adherence to strict security baselines and regulatory mandates, what is the most professionally sound approach to managing security configurations within VCF? Option A. Develop and enforce security policies at the VCF foundation level and extend these policies to individual workloads through automation and integrated management tools. Option B. Rely on individual workload owners to implement their own security controls, assuming they are aware of organizational security standards. Option C. Implement security configurations manually for each workload after deployment. Prioritizing speed of provisioning. Option D. Deploy workloads first and address security configurations as a secondary task, assuming security can be retrofitted effectively later. Correct answer is C. Implement security configurations manually for each workload after deployment, prioritizing speed of provisioning. Explanation: the analysis reveals a common challenge in cloud environments, ensuring consistent security posture across diverse workloads and infrastructure components within VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF. Specifically, the scenario highlights the tension between rapid deployment needs and the imperative to adhere to established security baselines and compliance requirements. Professionals must balance agility with robust governance. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive, policy-driven strategy for security configuration management. This involves leveraging VCF's integrated capabilities and adhering to the principle of least privilege. By defining and enforcing security policies at the foundation level and then extending these policies to individual workloads, organizations can achieve a consistent and auditable security posture. This aligns with best practices for cloud security and compliance, ensuring that security is not an afterthought but an integral part of the VCF lifecycle. This approach is professionally sound because it minimizes the attack surface, reduces the likelihood of misconfigurations, and facilitates compliance audits by providing a clear, documented, and enforced security framework. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on manual security configurations for individual workloads after deployment. This is professionally unacceptable because it is prone to human error, leads to inconsistent security settings, and makes auditing and compliance extremely difficult. It also creates a significant security debt that is hard to remediate. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed of deployment over security policy enforcement, assuming that security can be retrofitted later. This is a critical regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the principle of security by design and exposes the organization to significant risks, potentially leading to data breaches and non-compliance with industry regulations and data protection laws. The assumption that security can be easily retrofitted is a dangerous fallacy in complex cloud environments. A third incorrect approach would be to implement security controls in isolation for different components of VCF without a unified strategy. This leads to a fragmented security posture, where gaps can exist between different layers of the stack, creating vulnerabilities. It also hinders effective monitoring and incident response, as security events may not be correlated across the entire environment. This lack of integration is a direct contravention of best practices for secure cloud architecture. The professional reasoning process for such situations involves a risk-based approach. First, understand the organization's security and compliance requirements. Second, evaluate the capabilities of the VCF platform to meet these requirements. Third, design a security architecture that leverages VCF's native features and integrates with existing security tools. Fourth, implement a continuous monitoring and auditing process to ensure ongoing compliance and identify any deviations. Finally, establish clear roles and responsibilities for security management within the VCF environment. Question 12. The control framework reveals that a new business unit requires rapid deployment of several virtual machines within the VMware Cloud Foundation environment to support an upcoming product launch. While the deployment process is streamlined for speed, there is a risk that these new workloads may not adhere to the organization's established security policies and regulatory compliance mandates, particularly concerning network segmentation and data access controls. The VCF administrator must ensure that compliance is maintained without significantly impeding the business unit's critical timeline. Which of the following approaches best addresses this challenge while upholding regulatory and security best practices within the VCF environment? Option A. Temporarily disable certain security controls and network restrictions during the initial deployment phase to accelerate the process, with a plan to re-enable them once the product launch is complete. Option B. Rely on the business unit's self-attestation of compliance after deployment, assuming they have followed the necessary guidelines. Option C. Implement automated security policies and network segmentation rules within VCF that are enforced during the VM provisioning process, leveraging NSXT and vSphere security configurations to ensure compliance by default. Option D. Conduct a thorough manual security review and compliance audit of each virtual machine after it has been deployed and is operational. The correct answer is C. Implement automated security policies and network segmentation rules within VCF that are enforced during the VM provisioning process, leveraging NSXT and vSphere security configurations to ensure compliance by default. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where rapid deployment and resource provisioning can outpace formal governance and security reviews. The professional is tasked with ensuring compliance with VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, best practices, and underlying regulatory requirements without halting critical business operations. The challenge lies in balancing agility with control, ensuring that new deployments adhere to established security postures and operational standards, which are often dictated by industry-specific regulations or internal compliance mandates. The pressure to deliver services quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise security and auditability. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated strategy. By leveraging VCF's built-in capabilities for policy enforcement and automation, such as NSXT microsegmentation and vSphere security configurations, the professional can ensure that new workloads are deployed with predefined security controls. Integrating these controls into the deployment pipeline, potentially through infrastructure as code (ISC) or automated workflows, ensures that compliance is baked in from the start. This aligns with the principle of security by design and demonstrates due diligence in maintaining a compliant and secure environment, which is a fundamental expectation under most regulatory frameworks governing data protection and operational integrity. This approach minimizes the risk of noncompliance by making adherence the default. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying solely on post-deployment audits. This is a reactive measure that fails to prevent non-compliant deployments from occurring in the first place. It increases the risk of security breaches or regulatory violations going undetected for extended periods, leading to significant remediation costs and potential penalties. This approach fundamentally misunderstands the proactive nature of modern compliance and security management. Another incorrect approach is to manually review and approve every new deployment. While seemingly thorough, this method is not scalable in a dynamic cloud environment and introduces significant delays, hindering business agility. It also relies heavily on individual judgment, increasing the potential for human error and inconsistency, which can lead to regulatory noncompliance due to a lack of standardized controls. A third incorrect approach is to disable security controls temporarily to expedite deployment. This is a direct violation of security best practices and likely contravenes regulatory requirements for continuous security monitoring and protection. It creates a window of vulnerability that can be exploited, leading to data breaches and severe compliance failures. This demonstrates a disregard for established security policies and regulatory obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, proactive approach to compliance and security in VCF environments. This involves understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to their organization and integrating compliance requirements into the design and automation of cloud infrastructure. Key decision-making steps include identifying critical compliance controls, mapping these controls to VCF capabilities, automating their enforcement through ISC and CI/CD pipelines, and establishing continuous monitoring and auditing processes. The goal is to build compliance into the fabric of the environment rather than treating it as an afterthought. Question 13. Process analysis reveals that a new VMware Cloud Foundation deployment is nearing its go-live date, with significant business pressure to complete the deployment rapidly. The deployment team has completed the core infrastructure setup, but has not yet conducted a comprehensive review of security configurations against documented baselines or verified compliance with relevant industry standards. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the VCF specialist? Option A. Halt the go-live process until a thorough security and compliance validation against official documentation and established baselines is completed. Option B. Rely on the team's collective experience to ensure security and compliance, assuming default configurations are adequate for initial operations. Option C. Delegate the security and compliance validation to a junior team member with the instruction to make it secure enough for the go-live. Option D. Proceed with the deployment and schedule a security and compliance review for the post-go-live period. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the deployment and schedule a security and compliance review for the post-go-live period. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where the rapid pace of deployment can sometimes outstrip the thoroughness of security and compliance validation. The professional is tasked with ensuring that a new VMware Cloud Foundation deployment adheres to the specific regulatory framework governing its operation, which in this context is implicitly tied to the VMware Cloud Foundation specialist. V2. Exam scope, implying adherence to VMware's best practices and potentially industry-specific compliance standards that VCF is designed to support. The challenge lies in balancing the business need for timely deployment with the absolute necessity of meeting these foundational requirements. Failure to do so can lead to significant security vulnerabilities, compliance breaches, and operational instability, all of which carry substantial financial and reputational risks. The pressure to deliver quickly can tempt shortcuts, making rigorous adherence to established procedures paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the VCF deployment against the documented security and compliance baselines, as defined by VMware's official documentation, and any relevant industry standards or regulatory mandates applicable to the deployment environment. This includes verifying that all security controls are configured as per best practices, that network segmentation is correctly implemented, that identity and access management is robust, and that logging and monitoring are enabled and functioning. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core responsibilities of a VCF specialist, ensuring a secure, compliant, and stable foundation. It aligns with the principle of security by design and proactive risk management, which are critical in regulated environments. Adhering to official documentation and established baselines ensures that the deployment meets the intended security posture and regulatory requirements without introducing unforeseen risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the deployment based solely on the assumption that default configurations are sufficient. This is professionally unacceptable because default settings are often designed for ease of initial setup, rather than for optimal security or compliance in a production environment. They may not meet specific regulatory mandates or industry best practices, leaving the deployment vulnerable to known exploits, non-compliant with data protection laws. Another incorrect approach is to rely on tribal knowledge or informal peer recommendations for security configurations. This is a significant ethical and professional failure. Tribal knowledge is often inconsistent, undocumented, and can become outdated quickly. It lacks the authority and rigor of official documentation and established baselines, leading to a fragmented and potentially insecure deployment. This approach bypasses the established governance and quality assurance processes, increasing the likelihood of errors and non-compliance. A third incorrect approach is to defer security and compliance validation to a later stage, after the initial deployment is complete. This is a critical professional lapse. Security and compliance are not afterthoughts. They are integral to the design and deployment process. Attempting to retrofit security and compliance measures after deployment is significantly more complex, costly, and less effective than building them in from the start. It also exposes the organization to risks during the interim period, which can be substantial. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves understanding the potential impact of non-compliance and security breaches, identifying the relevant regulatory and best practice requirements, and implementing a phased approach to validation. The process should begin with a thorough understanding of the deployment's intended use and the associated compliance obligations. This understanding should then inform the selection and configuration of security controls. A checklist derived from official documentation and compliance standards should be used to guide the deployment and validation process. Regular audits and reviews, both internal and potentially external, are essential to ensure ongoing adherence. When faced with pressure to expedite, professionals must clearly articulate the risks associated with shortcuts and advocate for adherence to established procedures, prioritizing security and compliance as non-negotiable elements of a successful deployment. Question 14. During the evaluation of a new VMware Cloud Foundation deployment intended to host sensitive customer data, the project timeline is extremely aggressive, with business units pushing for immediate availability of virtual machines. The VCF specialist has identified several critical security hardening steps and compliance checks that are not yet fully implemented, but are required by the organization's internal security policy and relevant industry regulations. What is the most professional and compliant course of action? Option A. Proceed with the deployment and virtual machine provisioning, documenting the outstanding security and compliance items for remediation in a subsequent phase to meet the immediate business need. Option B. Halt the deployment and virtual machine provisioning until all identified security hardening steps and compliance checks are fully implemented and validated, even if it means missing the aggressive business deadline. Option C. Implement a subset of the most critical security hardening steps and compliance checks that can be completed quickly, and defer less critical items to a later phase, while still allowing initial VM provisioning. Option D. Delegate the responsibility for completing the remaining security and compliance tasks to the operations team after the initial deployment, assuming they have the expertise to address them. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the deployment and virtual machine provisioning, documenting the outstanding security and compliance items for remediation in a subsequent phase to meet the immediate business need. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where rapid deployment and resource provisioning can outpace robust security and compliance validation. The professional is tasked with ensuring that a new VMware Cloud Foundation deployment adheres to established security baselines and regulatory requirements without causing undue delays to critical business operations. The challenge lies in balancing the need for speed with the imperative of security and compliance, especially when dealing with sensitive data or regulated workloads. Pressure to deliver quickly can tempt shortcuts, but failing to implement proper security controls from the outset can lead to significant vulnerabilities and compliance breaches, with severe consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated security and compliance strategy. This means embedding security and compliance checks into the VCF deployment lifecycle, from initial design through to ongoing operations. Specifically, leveraging VMware's built-in security features and compliance tools, such as vSphere security hardening guides, NSXT microsegmentation policies, and vRealize Suite's compliance reporting capabilities, is paramount. Ensuring that these controls are configured according to industry best practices and relevant regulatory frameworks, e.g., those applicable to the specific industry or data being handled within the VCF environment, before workloads are deployed, is the most professional and secure method. This approach aligns with the principle of security by design and ensures that compliance is not an afterthought but a foundational element of the cloud infrastructure. It minimizes the risk of post-deployment remediation, which is often more costly and disruptive. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to prioritize rapid deployment over immediate security and compliance validation, assuming that security measures can be retrofitted later. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the principle of due diligence and could lead to data breaches or noncompliance with regulations that mandate specific security controls be in place from the moment data is processed or stored. Such an approach demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and foresight, potentially exposing the organization to legal penalties, reputational damage, and financial losses. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on generic security best practices without mapping them to the specific regulatory requirements of the environment. While general security is important, regulatory compliance often dictates specific controls, audit trails, and reporting mechanisms. Failing to address these specific mandates means the deployment, while perhaps generally secure, is not compliant, leading to potential legal and financial repercussions. This approach shows a superficial understanding of compliance obligations and a failure to exercise professional judgment in tailoring security to the specific context. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the responsibility for security and compliance validation entirely to a separate team without clear communication channels or defined responsibilities. While specialized teams are valuable, the primary professional responsible for the VCF deployment must ensure that security and compliance are integrated. Siloed responsibilities can lead to misinterpretations, overlooked requirements, and a lack of accountability, ultimately resulting in a non-compliant and insecure environment. This failure in collaboration and oversight is a professional lapse. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this domain must adopt a risk-based approach that integrates security and compliance throughout the entire lifecycle of a VMware Cloud Foundation deployment. This involves understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the organization and the data being handled. The decision-making process should prioritize identifying and mitigating risks early. This means conducting thorough security and compliance assessments during the design and planning phases, implementing controls that are aligned with both general security best practices and specific regulatory mandates, and establishing continuous monitoring and auditing processes. Collaboration with security and compliance teams is essential, but the ultimate responsibility for ensuring a secure and compliant deployment rests with the VCF specialist. This proactive, integrated, and risk-aware approach is the hallmark of professional excellence in cloud infrastructure management. Question 15. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in latency for a critical application hosted on VMware Cloud Foundation, coinciding with a gradual rise in CPU utilization across multiple hosts in the cluster. The application team reports no recent code changes, and the underlying storage array shows no signs of distress. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate next step to diagnose and resolve the performance issue? Option A. Immediately allocate additional CPU and memory resources to the virtual machines hosting the critical application to alleviate potential resource starvation. Option B. Isolate the affected virtual machines to a different cluster within the VCF environment to rule out host-specific issues. Option C. Analyze vSphere performance charts and logs for the affected cluster and hosts to identify specific resource contention, CPU, memory, network, storage I/O, and correlate it with the application's workload. Option D. Initiate a network saturation test on the affected network segments to determine if network bandwidth is the primary bottleneck. The correct answer is C. Analyze vSphere performance charts and logs for the affected cluster and hosts to identify specific resource contention, CPU, memory, network, storage I/O, and correlate it with the application's workload. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments: unexpected resource contention impacting application performance. The professional challenge lies in accurately diagnosing the root cause within a complex, multi-tenant VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) environment, ensuring compliance with operational best practices and potentially service-level agreements (SLAs) without disrupting other tenants or violating security policies. The need for a systematic, data-driven approach is paramount. The correct approach involves leveraging VCF's integrated monitoring and logging capabilities to correlate performance metrics with specific resource utilization patterns at the vSphere and potentially underlying infrastructure levels. This allows for the identification of whether the bottleneck is CPU, memory, storage I/O, or network bandwidth, and importantly, whether it's isolated to the affected workload or indicative of a broader resource constraint within the VCF deployment. This aligns with VCF's design principles of centralized management and visibility, promoting efficient resource allocation and troubleshooting. Adhering to VCF best practices for resource management and performance tuning is a key professional responsibility. An incorrect approach would be to immediately assume a specific component failure or to make broad configuration changes without sufficient data. For instance, randomly increasing VM resources without understanding the actual bottleneck could lead to overprovisioning, increased costs, and potentially exacerbate performance issues by shifting contention to other resources. Another incorrect approach would be to isolate the VM without proper change control or impact assessment, potentially violating operational procedures and impacting other services that might rely on the same underlying infrastructure. Making assumptions about network saturation without verifying network metrics would be a failure to follow a data-driven troubleshooting methodology. The professional decision-making process should involve 1. Clearly defining the observed problem and its impact. 2. Gathering all relevant performance data from VCF's monitoring tools. 3. Analyzing this data to identify potential root causes, considering all layers of the VCF stack. 4. Formulating a hypothesis based on the data. 5. Testing the hypothesis through targeted diagnostics or controlled changes. And 6. Implementing a solution with appropriate change management and validation. Question 16. The evaluation methodology shows that a new VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) environment is being provisioned for a critical business unit that handles sensitive customer data. The deployment team is under pressure to meet an aggressive go-live deadline. Before the VCF environment is fully operational and accessible to end users, what is the most critical step to ensure regulatory compliance and data security? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive security and compliance validation of the VCF configuration against established organizational policies and relevant regulatory mandates. Option B. Assign the security and compliance validation solely to the internal audit team without direct involvement from the deployment team. Option C. Accept the VMware default security configurations as sufficient and proceed with the deployment. Option D. Proceed with the deployment and schedule a security and compliance review after the environment is live and operational. Correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive security and compliance validation of the VCF configuration against established organizational policies and relevant regulatory mandates. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where rapid deployment and resource provisioning can outpace robust security and compliance validation. The professional is tasked with ensuring that a new VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) deployment adheres to the organization's security policies and relevant regulatory requirements, specifically those applicable to the exam's jurisdiction. The challenge lies in balancing the business need for timely deployment with the imperative to maintain a secure and compliant posture from the outset. Failure to do so can lead to significant security vulnerabilities, data breaches, and regulatory penalties. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated security and compliance review as part of the VCF deployment lifecycle. This aligns with best practices for secure cloud adoption and regulatory frameworks that mandate security by design and privacy by design. Specifically, it requires validating that the VCF configuration, including network segmentation, access controls, data encryption, and logging mechanisms, meets the defined security baselines and regulatory mandates before going live. This approach ensures that compliance is not an afterthought but a foundational element of the deployment, minimizing risk and demonstrating due diligence. This is consistent with the principles of responsible IT governance and risk management expected in regulated industries. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the deployment and address security and compliance concerns post-implementation. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the principle of proactive risk management and can lead to the deployment of systems with known vulnerabilities or non-compliance issues, exposing the organization to data breaches and legal repercussions. It also demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility in ensuring the integrity and security of the deployed infrastructure. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on vendor default configurations without independent validation against organizational policies and regulatory requirements. While vendors strive for secure defaults, these may not always align with specific industry regulations or an organization's unique risk appetite. This approach can lead to compliance gaps and security weaknesses, as it bypasses the critical step of tailoring the deployment to meet specific governance needs. It is an abdication of the professional's responsibility to ensure the deployed solution is fit for purpose and compliant. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the entire security and compliance validation to a separate team without clear communication and integration into the deployment plan. While specialized teams are valuable, a lack of direct involvement and understanding by the deployment team can lead to misinterpretations, delays, and ultimately, a deployment that does not fully meet the validated requirements. This can be seen as a failure in collaborative responsibility and effective risk mitigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this domain must adopt a risk-based approach, integrating security and compliance considerations throughout the entire VCF deployment lifecycle. This involves understanding the relevant regulatory landscape, establishing clear security baselines, and implementing a continuous validation process. Decision-making should be guided by the principle of least privilege, robust access controls, comprehensive logging, and data protection measures. When faced with conflicting priorities, the professional must advocate for the security and compliance requirements, escalating concerns if necessary, to ensure that business objectives are met without compromising the organization's security posture or regulatory obligations. Question 17. Regulatory review indicates that a new feature within VMware Cloud Foundation is available for deployment, promising enhanced operational efficiency. The IT operations team is eager to implement this feature to realize the promised benefits quickly. However, the VCF specialist is aware that new features can sometimes introduce unforeseen complexities or security considerations. What is the most prudent and compliant approach for the VCF specialist to take before proceeding with the deployment? Option A. Proceed with the deployment based on the anecdotal experience and understanding of a senior team member who has worked with similar features in the past. Option B. Immediately deploy the new feature to capitalize on the efficiency gains, assuming the vendor has thoroughly tested it. Option C. Consult the official VMware Cloud Foundation release notes, security advisories, and operational best practices documentation relevant to the new feature before planning and executing the deployment. Option D. Rely on the marketing materials provided by the vendor as they typically highlight the key benefits and ease of use. Correct answer is B. Immediately deploy the new feature to capitalize on the efficiency gains, assuming the vendor has thoroughly tested it. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the inherent tension between rapid technological adoption and the imperative of regulatory compliance within the VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) ecosystem. The pressure to deploy new features and services quickly, driven by business demands, can create a temptation to bypass or inadequately address the security and operational controls mandated by VCF best practices and underlying regulatory frameworks. The challenge lies in balancing innovation with robust governance, ensuring that the deployment of new VCF capabilities does not inadvertently introduce vulnerabilities or operational risks that could lead to non-compliance. Careful judgment is required to assess the potential impact of new features on the existing security posture and operational stability, and to ensure that all necessary validation and configuration steps are performed. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach, which involves a thorough review of VCF release notes, security advisories, and operational best practices before implementing the new feature, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principle of proactive risk management and due diligence. Specifically, it adheres to the implicit regulatory expectation of maintaining a secure and compliant operational environment. By consulting release notes and security advisories, the specialist ensures they are aware of any known vulnerabilities or configuration changes required for the new feature. Reviewing operational best practices guarantees that the implementation will be performed in a manner that maintains the integrity and stability of the VCF environment, thereby preventing potential breaches or service disruptions that could trigger regulatory scrutiny. This methodical approach demonstrates a commitment to understanding the full implications of a change before it is introduced into production. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the new feature immediately without any prior review of VCF documentation or advisories represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the potential for introducing known vulnerabilities or misconfigurations, which could lead to a security incident or operational failure. Such an oversight could be interpreted as negligence, failing to uphold the duty of care to protect the integrity and confidentiality of the data and services managed by VCF. Deploying the feature based solely on vendor marketing materials, without consulting technical documentation or security advisories, is also professionally unacceptable. Vendor marketing often highlights benefits without detailing the necessary security configurations or potential operational impacts. Relying on such information alone is a superficial approach that bypasses critical due diligence, increasing the risk of noncompliance and security breaches. Relying on tribal knowledge or the experience of a single team member without formal validation or documentation introduces a high degree of risk. This approach is susceptible to individual error, outdated information, and a lack of consistent application of best practices. It fails to establish a repeatable and auditable process, which is often a requirement for regulatory compliance and robust operational management. This can lead to inconsistent configurations across environments and a lack of accountability. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with managing and deploying VCF should adopt a structured decision-making process that prioritizes risk assessment and adherence to established guidelines. This process should involve 1. Understanding the business requirement for the change. 2. Thoroughly researching the technical implications, including consulting official documentation, release notes, and security advisories. 3. Assessing the potential impact on the existing VCF environment, including security, performance, and operational stability. 4. Developing a detailed implementation plan that incorporates necessary validation and rollback procedures. 5. Executing the plan with meticulous attention to detail and documenting all steps. 6. Post-implementation verification and monitoring. This framework ensures that technological advancements are integrated responsibly, maintaining the integrity and compliance of the VCF deployment. Question 18. Governance review demonstrates that several new VMware Cloud Foundation services have been deployed by various teams without a formal approval process or integration into the existing security and compliance framework. This has led to inconsistencies in configuration and a lack of centralized visibility into the deployed services. What is the most appropriate immediate action to address this situation and prevent future occurrences? Option A. Immediately halt all new service deployments until a comprehensive governance and approval framework is established and all existing unapproved services are audited and brought into compliance. Option B. Encourage teams to continue deploying new services as needed to maintain agility, with the understanding that a governance review will be conducted retrospectively. Option C. Prioritize the technical integration of all newly deployed services to ensure they are functional, and address governance and compliance concerns in a subsequent phase. Option D. Issue a directive to all teams to document any new services they have deployed and to implement basic security controls as they see fit. The correct answer is A. Immediately halt all new service deployments until a comprehensive governance and approval framework is established and all existing unapproved services are audited and brought into compliance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where the rapid adoption of new services can outpace the establishment of robust governance and compliance controls. The challenge lies in balancing the agility and innovation offered by cloud technologies with the imperative to maintain security, compliance, and operational integrity. Specifically, the lack of a defined process for approving and integrating new VMware Cloud Foundation services creates a significant risk of shadow IT, misconfigurations, and non-compliance with internal policies and potentially external regulatory requirements. The pressure to deliver new capabilities quickly can lead to shortcuts that undermine long-term stability and security. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves establishing a formal, documented process for evaluating, approving, and integrating new VMware Cloud Foundation services. This process should include a risk assessment, security review, compliance validation against relevant standards, e.g., internal security policies, industry best practices, and any applicable regulatory frameworks, and operational readiness checks. This proactive, structured approach ensures that new services are introduced in a controlled manner, minimizing risks and aligning with the organization's overall governance framework. It demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing security and compliance from the outset, fostering a culture of responsible innovation, and ensuring that the cloud environment remains manageable and auditable. This aligns with the principles of secure cloud adoption and operational excellence expected of a VMware Cloud Foundation specialist. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing new services without a formal review process is a direct violation of sound governance principles. It bypasses critical security and compliance checks, increasing the likelihood of vulnerabilities and data breaches. This approach creates an unmanageable environment where the organization lacks visibility into its deployed services, making it difficult to enforce policies or respond to incidents. Allowing individual teams to self-provision and manage new services without central oversight introduces significant risks. While it may seem to accelerate deployment, it leads to fragmentation, inconsistent configurations, and a lack of standardization. This can result in security gaps, compliance failures, and increased operational complexity, as there is no unified approach to management and support. Focusing solely on the technical functionality of a new service without considering its security implications or integration into the existing governance framework is a critical oversight. This narrow focus ignores the broader impact on the organization's risk posture and compliance obligations, leading to potential regulatory noncompliance and security vulnerabilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this domain must adopt a risk-based approach to cloud service adoption. This involves understanding the organization's risk appetite, identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities associated with new technologies, and implementing appropriate controls. A key aspect of professional decision-making is the ability to advocate for and implement robust governance processes that ensure the secure and compliant deployment of cloud services. This requires effective communication with stakeholders, a thorough understanding of the VMware Cloud Foundation architecture, and a commitment to continuous improvement in security and compliance practices. The decision-making process should prioritize the long-term health and security of the cloud environment over short-term expediency. Question 19. The assessment process reveals that several virtual machines deployed within the VMware Cloud Foundation environment are running with outdated operating system patches and are not adhering to the defined network segmentation policies, potentially exposing sensitive data. What is the most appropriate course of action to address these findings? Option A. Disable network segmentation for the affected virtual machines to simplify management and improve their connectivity, and schedule a review of patching requirements for a later date. Option B. Acknowledge the findings but defer any remediation efforts until a security incident occurs, as the current configuration has not yet resulted in a breach. Option C. Immediately initiate a comprehensive review of the VCF deployment against established security baselines and compliance mandates, identifying specific deviations and planning targeted remediation actions for patching and network policy enforcement. Option D. Implement immediate, uncoordinated changes to the virtual machine's network configurations and apply available patches without prior testing or documentation to resolve the issues quickly. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a comprehensive review of the VCF deployment against established security baselines and compliance mandates, identifying specific deviations and planning targeted remediation actions for patching and network policy enforcement. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where resource sprawl and unmanaged configurations can lead to security vulnerabilities and compliance risks. The professional is tasked with identifying and rectifying these issues within a VMware Cloud Foundation (VCF) deployment. The challenge lies in balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with the imperative of maintaining a secure and compliant infrastructure, especially when dealing with sensitive data or regulated workloads. Adherence to VMware's best practices and the specific compliance requirements of the organization are paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the VCF deployment against established security baselines and compliance mandates. This includes verifying network segmentation, access controls, encryption configurations, and the patching status of all VCF components and deployed workloads. By leveraging VCF's built-in management tools and potentially integrating with external security and compliance monitoring solutions, the professional can identify deviations from the desired state. Implementing remediation actions based on this assessment, such as reconfiguring network policies, enforcing stricter access controls, or applying necessary patches, directly addresses the identified risks and brings the environment back into compliance. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and defense in depth, which are fundamental to secure cloud operations and are implicitly or explicitly supported by VCF's design and VMware's security guidance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately disabling security features to improve performance or simplify operations. This is a direct violation of security best practices and likely contravenes organizational security policies and any applicable regulatory frameworks. Disabling features like network segmentation or access controls exposes the environment to unauthorized access, data breaches, and potential compliance violations. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the findings of the assessment, assuming that the current configuration is acceptable because no immediate security incidents have occurred. This reactive stance is professionally negligent. Regulatory frameworks often require proactive risk management and continuous monitoring. Waiting for an incident to occur is a failure to meet these obligations and significantly increases the organization's exposure to financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruption. A third incorrect approach is to implement ad hoc changes without proper documentation or testing. While seemingly a quick fix, this can introduce new vulnerabilities or break existing functionality. It also undermines the auditability and traceability of changes, which are critical for compliance and incident response. This approach lacks the rigor and control necessary for managing a production VCF environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this domain must adopt a proactive and systematic approach to security and compliance. This involves understanding the organization's specific regulatory landscape and aligning VCF configurations accordingly. A robust assessment process, followed by a well-planned and executed remediation strategy, is essential. Decision-making should be guided by a risk-based methodology, prioritizing the most critical vulnerabilities and compliance gaps. Continuous monitoring and regular audits are also key components of maintaining a secure and compliant VCF environment. Question 20. Implementation of VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, requires careful consideration of data governance and regulatory compliance. Which of the following approaches best ensures that sensitive data processed within the VCF environment adheres to relevant data protection regulations? Option A. Deploy VCF with standard security configurations and rely on post-deployment audits to identify and rectify any compliance gaps. Option B. Proceed with VCF deployment using generic data handling procedures and address specific regulatory concerns only if an incident occurs. Option C. Prioritize the classification of data types and their associated regulatory requirements before configuring VCF, and then design security controls and data handling policies accordingly. Option D. Focus solely on implementing robust network security and encryption for the VCF infrastructure, assuming data protection will be inherently covered. The correct answer is C. Prioritize the classification of data types and their associated regulatory requirements before configuring VCF, and then design security controls and data handling policies accordingly. Explanation: the implementation of VMware Cloud Foundation, VCF, within an organization necessitates adherence to a robust regulatory compliance framework, particularly concerning data privacy and security. This scenario presents a common challenge where the rapid deployment of cloud infrastructure might outpace the formalization of data governance policies, creating potential compliance gaps. The professional challenge lies in balancing the agility offered by VCF with the imperative to protect sensitive data as mandated by relevant regulations. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and integrated strategy for compliance. This involves embedding data classification and protection mechanisms directly into the VCF deployment lifecycle. By conducting a thorough data impact assessment and aligning VCF configurations with specific data handling requirements, organizations can ensure that sensitive information is appropriately secured and managed throughout its lifecycle. This aligns with the principle of privacy by design and security by design, which are fundamental to many regulatory frameworks, ensuring that compliance is not an afterthought but a core component of the technical implementation. This approach demonstrates a commitment to regulatory adherence and ethical data stewardship. An incorrect approach that overlooks the need for data classification before deployment creates a significant regulatory risk. Without understanding the sensitivity of the data being processed or stored within VCF, it is impossible to implement appropriate security controls, access management, or data retention policies. This failure directly contravenes regulations that mandate the protection of personal or confidential information, potentially leading to data breaches, unauthorized access, and severe penalties. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on technical security measures without considering data governance, is also professionally unsound. While firewalls, encryption, and access controls are vital, they are insufficient if the underlying data is not properly classified and its handling governed by clear policies. This can lead to situations where data is stored or processed in non-compliant ways, even if the infrastructure itself is technically secure. This demonstrates a lack of holistic understanding of regulatory requirements, which often extend beyond technical controls to encompass organizational policies and procedures. A third incorrect approach, relying on post-deployment audits to identify compliance issues, is reactive and carries substantial risk. While audits are important, they are a verification step, not a preventative measure. Waiting for an audit to discover noncompliance means that sensitive data may have already been exposed or mishandled, leading to potential regulatory violations and reputational damage. Best professional practice dictates a proactive approach where compliance is built into the system from the outset. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This begins with identifying all applicable regulatory requirements. Subsequently, a comprehensive data inventory and classification exercise should be performed to understand the types of data that will reside within VCF. This understanding then informs the design and configuration of VCF, ensuring that security controls, access policies, and data lifecycle management are aligned with regulatory mandates. Continuous monitoring and regular reviews are also crucial to maintain compliance in an evolving threat landscape and regulatory environment.